What is going on? Thanks for tuning in to the 235th edition of the MMA podcast, where today we're breaking down UFC Hamburg, going down yesterday, Sunday, in Germany. A few captivating fights on the card. It broke a couple records, but I don't know if they're the kind of records you want to break. Joined as always by Sweet Pappy Jones. It's P Money. What's going on, dude?
Big J.
Yeah.
Oh man, we're just chilling, Doug. It's a fantastic day over here. Had a fun time with that rare UFC Sunday card, and just in the dog days of summer, my man. Just thank goodness the AC's still cranking.
For real, both where you are and where I am. A couple hot spots in the continental U.S. in Tampa Bay and down in that SoCal desert. But all the way across the pond over in Germany, we had UFC Hamburg going down, headlined by a legend, Shogun Hua, and an up-and-comer, Anthony Lionheart Smith. Gonna just start like we usually do, though, working from the top up. And I try not to be that guy who's like, oh, this is a boring card, because there have been so many great cards that just, perhaps didn't have the big names on them, perhaps didn't have the push, they went down in some random city in Arkansas, but they have great fights, and the fight card as a whole is undersold. This card had definitely its moments. There were a few finishes, including the main event, which was nice. But we had 9 straight decisions, which I believe is a UFC record. It ties the record for most decisions, period, with 10. And a decision fight, there can be very exciting back and forth fights. I think I think that Danny Roberts versus David Zawada, the split decision fight on the main event, one fight of the night for good reason. That was fun. But when you got 10 decisions, the likelihood is 7 or 8 of those could be snoozers. And we had a lot of snoozers. Starting with the prelims, actually, we had a couple finishes by Manny Bermudez and Darko Stosic. But when we got to the prelims and the main cards on Fox Sports 1, that's when all the decisions started going down. Alexander Ratchik, Nad Nirimani, Bartosz Fabinski, Damir Hadzovic, Nasrat Hakparast, Danny Roberts, Marcin Tybura, Abu Al-Zitar, and Corey Anderson, all winning back-to-back times 9 decisions. Some interesting results in there, too. When I looked at the odds leading up to it, I noticed that there were a lot of close fights as far as the odds makers had it, which, like I kind of mentioned before, could result in a very fun, back-and-forth, evenly matched war, or in some cases, if they are equally matched and they neutralize each other, you might be watching a boring decision, which unfortunately we got a lot of. Mark Diakase, the guy who had a lot of clout behind his name, coming over undefeated from Bama in 2016, won his first 3 fights in the UFC. Now, unfortunately, on a 3-fight losing streak, losing a split decision to Drakkar Klose, getting guillotine choked by Dan Hooker at UFC 219, and then with this loss here at UFC Hamburg versus Nasrat Hakparast. Email Meek, another guy too, who a lot of people were talking about, especially after he KO'd Rusimar Palhares and Venator, came over, got a unanimous decision win in his UFC debut against Jordan Meehan in 2016. Took 2017 off, and 2018 has not been that kind to him. Granted, he did face Kamaru Usman, who is an absolute monster, and I don't think losing to... I mean, you very well could be a top 5, top 10 welterweight and still lose to Kamaru Usman. He very well could be the future of 170. He lost to Usman and then loses again here to Bartosz Fabinski. Some other interesting, I'll save that Corey Anderson and Glover Teixeira. Yeah, I'll save the light heavyweight results for their own discussion. But we had Marcin Tybura defeat Stefan Struve. Struve kind of had a little bit of a card up his sleeve as long as Stipe was champion, because he had been the only guy, one of the only guys to beat Stefan Struve, or sorry, to beat Stipe. But now that he's 3 losses deep in a row to Volkov, Arlovsky, and Tybura, and Stipe Miocic no longer has the belt. He's starting to run out of bargaining chips. But, the guy's still really young. He's 30, which is, compared to the rest of those heavyweights, clocks in pretty young there. I guess those were all the thoughts I had before we get to the co-main and main event. Pat, any fights stand out to you? Were you, did you watch the fights live? I guess that would have been late morning Sunday. I actually had to watch the fights on replay because I was driving down the state through a bunch of thunderstorms. Watched it last night. Admittedly, fast forwarded through a lot of it because there were a lot of boring decisions.
Oh man, yeah. I did not watch it live, but I did. Thank goodness for fast forward. I was able to fast forward through some of the commercials. Didn't fast forward through the fights. The Fight Pass portion, started off all right. Lou Pingwan defeated Damon Stasiak by unanimous decision. Then Darko Stosic got a first-round TKO over Jeremy Kimball. Jeremy Kimball basically got taken down by Stosic. Felt just a little smidge in that ground and pound, said, no thank you. He turtled up real quick. Referee jumped in to save him. Good save by the referee in that affair there. And then Manny Bermudez choking out Davey Grant, technical sub with that triangle choke. Referee did not able to save him there. Nice little finish there. And then after that, it was taking a trip to Decision City. And some of them were more entertaining than the others. Alexander Rakic, dang it, I'll get that one eventually. Versus Justin Ledet, with the 30-25 and then 2 30-24 scores. Just really put an ass whooping on Justin Ledet, taking him down, ground and pound nonstop, hitting him with some hard shots. The fact that Justin Ledet made it through this fight was a testament to his toughness, coming down from heavyweight to light heavyweight. And Alexander Rakic, definitely solid prospect at 205 pounds. Definitely looking good with this performance. Great pressure there. God, I'm just gonna be terrible with all these names for this whole fight card. It's Taha versus Narimani. That was a pretty good bit of back and forth there. Not one of my favorites. Fabinski versus Emil Mek. Not one of my favorites as well. It was a good display. I like how Fabinski at the beginning of these guys just went flying at each other. The bell rang for the rounds, and they just ran at each other as fast as they could just to start throwing down. But very ground-centric, just a lot of smothering top game from Fabinski over Mek. Unanimous decision there. Damir Hadzovic over Nick Hein. That was a very close decision as well. At least from my perspective, very tight battle, very close one. I feel like when Damir had dropped Nick Hein, he hit him with I want to say it was a big right hand, dropped him. It was the only time anybody got dropped in that fight. And almost just by virtue of that, it was so close aside from that. I think really just that one sequence won him the fight, just in my book. Haqparast versus Jacasey. That was a good fight. Haqparast, man, showing some power. Jacasey showing some toughness. He was busted up pretty good. He was leaking pretty bad. Haqparast showing some what looked to be some real power at 155 pounds there. Um, Good showing against Jacasey, taking out a tough prospect there. Danny Roberts versus David Zawada, the fight of the night. Split decision, very back and forth. These guys definitely let it all hang out. They both looked like they were close to finishing one another. Both just beating the shit out of each other. That was definitely one of the more entertaining fights. Very deserving of fight of the night. Teixeira versus Stefan Struve. That was another example of me not knowing how to pick any fight Stefan Struve is in. I was going to pick Teixeira, but then I was like, Struve, and I ended up going with Struve, and look what happens. He gets a freaking hole put in his face. Stefan Struve, man, God bless him. That guy has been, talk about road miles. He's been through the ringer. Teixeira getting the decision. Elbowed a friggin' second mouth in his chin. Just this gigantic gash. Stefan Struve actually tweeted out a picture of it, or maybe it was an Instagram. I want to say it was today, where it was the hole in his chin, and you could see his tongue through it. Still bleeding. Just man, that was about you know what, that was actually a pretty good fight. Struve almost had Teixeira out there. Teixeira was able to use some smothering top gang though. Very strong heavyweight there. Both guys, good stuff. And then Azaitar versus Miranda. That was a pretty fun one as well. Azaitar definitely looking like a solid prospect at middleweight, looking like a big middleweight. And showing some good skills, some good power. I thought this was going to be one for Vitor Miranda, just right for the taking, but I was unaware. Abu Azaitar definitely a real deal prospect at 185 pounds seemingly. So it was definitely a bit tough there. Of course, when you get those strings of decisions going on, Jake, where you get 9 decisions in a row, even when they're fun scraps, sometimes it just gets hard, and then especially, you'll be watching, maybe there's a sequence, you're like, oh, someone's about to get finished, and then it doesn't happen, and you're like, oh, wow, this is really reality. We're just going to have all decisions. After a while, it can kind of suck some of the life out of a card, some of the energy out of it. But leading up to the co-main and main event, in between the decisions, started out with a couple finishes, but in between that decision streak, there was still some good scraps going on there.
Yeah, and that bumps us up to the main and co-main event. Corey Anderson versus Glover Teixeira. A pretty one-sided result. Another win for the number 9 ranked fighter. I believe Marcin Tybura was 9th at heavyweight, and Anderson 9th at light heavyweight, taking on Glover Teixeira, who actually was 3rd. So rankings-wise, this was a pretty big upset. Glover Teixeira had I thought I had that tab here. Yeah, Glover's been kind of up and down since beating Rashad Evans. Hasn't been able to string 2 wins or losses together, going all the way back to 2016. Beat Evans, lost to Rumble, beat Jared Cannonier, lost to Gus, beat Misha Sirkunov, and now loses the fight to Corey Anderson, Beast in 25-8, who is really starting to show not major improvements in any one area, but just his fight IQ seems to get better and better. The guy's still relatively young. He's 28, fighting out of that Ricardo Almeida BJJ team. He was on a streak there in 2017 where he had lost 3 of his last 4 fights, lost to Shogun, beat Sean O'Connell, but then lost to Jimmy Manuwa and OSP, and a lot of people were questioning his future at that 205 pound division. But the win against Patrick Cummins said something, but this win against Glover Teixeira, I think, is him really planting his flag in the ground, showing that he belongs in the top 10. Interesting who he gets next. He's fought a lot of these other guys in the top 10, whether it be Shogun, OSP, Jimmy Manoa, like I mentioned. I don't know who makes the most sense next. You have Vulcan and Gus, who just backed out of a fight. You have Ilir Latifi. I don't know if he is set up with an opponent right now. Does he? Let's see. I can check. No, he beat OSP, I guess. Yeah, in his last fight in February, that first round submission. Yeah, you know what? Let's see Ilir Latifi and Corey Anderson next. I think both of those guys have taken their lumps at 205 and had moments in their career where it looked like they were slipping up a bit, but both now are on impressive win streaks. If I'm the matchmaker, I guess that's the fight that I'm going to make. Glover Teixeira now, I don't know, he's 38. It does look like we might be coming to the tail end of his career, at least in the UFC. But it's we've seen guys make wild runs late in their career, but I think most of those runs were pre-USADA, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it's a big win in the co-main event for Corey Anderson at UFC Hamburg. Pat?
Yeah, absolutely. Great showing for overtime there. I was expecting Glover to get this one, but Corey Anderson definitely looks like he's really, like you were saying, Jake, not even necessarily making giant progress in his game. He's always seemed to have had the tools there, powerful endurance, good wrestling. Just seems like he's just putting it together a little bit better. And yeah, it was a great showing against the number 3 ranked guy at 205 pounds. Really a dominant performance. And he got it done everywhere. I think it's a great call out for him versus Latifi. Spot on matchmaking per usual, Jake. One of your more underrated talents there, but yeah, I think style wise, that's a great matchup. Both strong grapplers, just strong dudes overall at 205 pounds. Both hit super fucking hard. I think that'd be a solid match, and both have a similar trajectory now. I want to say this is 2 in a row for old Corey. So, Latifi's got a little win streak going himself. Yeah, why not match him up? Gonna have to have a title eliminator for DC to fight someone at some weight class. So let's get it going.
And that pushes us up to the main event, the fight that most everyone was talking to after, not just because it was the main event, but it was a finish after a UFC record 9 straight decisions. It was badly needed, and Anthony Smith didn't just finish Shogun, but he finished him quick, finished him in 89 seconds. A huge elbow that brought him to his knees, and then followed it up with some massive punches. Anthony Smith, man, this is a guy who started to bleep on the radar when he TKO'd Hector Lombard, lost to Thiago Santos, came back with a big knee against Rashad Evans. Now with a even bigger KO over Mauricio, who he's not just on the radar now, but he's joining the shortlist for title contenders at 205 pounds right now. He was briefly talked about perhaps a fight against Alexander Gustafsson in 2 weeks at UFC 227, although Gustafsson quickly was ruled out. I guess the day before had been ruled out by doctors to fight on that LA card. We'll see what happens next with Anthony Smith, but this is a light heavyweight who looks like you photoshopped like a baby's head onto like some big old swole jack guy. I mean, he's got the probably like the biggest baby face maybe in the history of the UFC, and especially when he wears like glasses, he's very well spoken. Does not come off like the monster you see in the cage, savaging people, but that seems to be his mo. Has a super boring name, Anthony Smith. I mean, change your name. I don't know. Lionheart's a decent nickname, but I don't know. I joke around, but the guy fighting on a Factory X in Omaha, Nebraska, he's the right size at 205, 6'4", 77.5-inch reach. We haven't really talked a lot about him on the podcast just because he had not really clicked on the radar till he joined the UFC, started getting some wins behind him, like I mentioned, TKOing Hector Lombard the first real time I started to pay close attention to him. But now that he's KO'd Rashad Evans and Mauricio Hua, he's got a lot of people's attention. I'm very, very interested to see. I think the UFC likes this guy. He won both of those fights, in quick succession. The Rashad Evans fight was just a month ago in June, and he said he's ready to turn around quick again and fight. We'll see if he gets his wish, but very, very impressive performance by Anthony Smith, who everyone has been talking about since that big KO yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. Big performance by Lionheart. Definitely, I would think has to be regarded as the biggest win in his career. First time headlining a UFC event, international territory, and getting it done in less than 90 seconds, which is exactly what your boy predicted. I mean, maybe not less than 90 seconds, but definitely had Smith by first round knockout there. Definitely seems like a good prospect on the rise. Definitely has the momentum coming his way. And it was just a complete outclassing from Anthony Smith, which I was shocked by. I mean, I really was debating back and forth on this one quite a bit because Shogun, in spite of his mileage, I mean, still being relatively young. I want to say he's like 33 maybe or something like that. But he's just been in the game for forever. And the wars he's been through, even though he had the 3-fight winning streak going into this, I thought youth and also size. I mean, Anthony Smith just being a huge light heavyweight himself, 6'4", I want to say he's going at, not a small guy. The youth, the size, he had some factors in his favor in this one, and man, he really put Shogun away with just a savage combination against the fence there. I mean, he hurt him on one side of the octagon and just kept pushing with strikes until he pushed him all the way clear to the other side of the octagon. And once Shogun's back was against the wall on the other side of that octagon, Smith just finished it. I want to say it was an elbow that got the job done ultimately after he was just piecing him up with some great combinations. Big, heavy left ended up putting down Shogun. And Mark Goddard with a great job, if I recall correctly. That was just cradling Shogun's head so his head didn't bounce off the canvas. Spot-on job from Goddard there. And, man, Anthony Smith definitely looking like a beast at 205 right now. Man, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't mind seeing him go up against old Corey Anderson if Anderson didn't get the fight with Latifi. Or in lieu of that, I'd say maybe even against Alexander Rakic. I mean, I would hate to kill two prospects like that, but I think that would be a solid test for both guys. Both guys going in a similar direction. I would not mind seeing that. Both are very very entertaining. Two of the more impressive fighters of the night on Sunday, and heck, why not get them in the octagon against each other?
Yeah, those actually you throw praise on me for being a good matchmaker, but that actually is better than anything I I could come up with for Anthony Smith, who's in a weird place. Some folks might say those two wins are against Asian guys, and he's gonna fight some younger contenders before you really start to throw him into the Lions Den at 205. But just from seeing what he's done, even in the fight he lost, the guy puts up a war, and I think he could take on one of these top guys in his division. Interesting to see what happens. We did mention that Alexander Gustafsson was offered a fight, maybe not by the UFC, but by Anthony Smith at UFC 227 in LA next month. Yeah, he was scheduled to face Volkan Ozdemir August 4th, UFC 227. But 3 or 4 days ago, on the 19th, Ozdemir was removed from the card due to a broken nose. And then it was announced yesterday that Gustafsson also pulled out from the fight due to an injury. And Gustafsson has been very vocal about either A, wanting a fight against Cormier, or B, wanting his fight to be a interim championship because DC is not defending the belt. DC put up some heat on Instagram about 20 hours ago. This is a post from Cormier to Gustafsson saying, "Dear Alex, I don't know what happened to you going back to the Rockhold situation. You've always been a stand-up guy, but your behavior changed. From calling a guy out the day after he got knocked out to now offering to fight me, knowing I have a broken hand after Volkan couldn't go. Now you've turned down Jan Blachowicz, turned down Khalil, all while calling for a heavyweight title fight. Now, moments after Anthony Smith does work like an animal, you decide you're hurt. Man, I respect you as a fighter. I'll always be grateful for October 2015, but you and I won't share the octagon again. I am disappointed in who you've become. You are so entitled, man. I can't deal with delusional people. Good luck recovering. Our time has passed. See you from the commentary table. DC." Damn, dropping the dad line on him. I am disappointed. Oh man, I'm not mad at you, Alex. I'm disappointed. You are so entitled. I can't deal with delusional people. And honestly, I can't blame him. Gus has been sitting here making demand after demand. But you go back to their fight in October 2015, which was a war, one of my favorite fights ever. But DC won. Going back to that fight, DC's fought 5 times, hasn't lost. Well, there's a no contest in there, but Gustafsson, he's only fought twice since October 2015. That's almost 3 years. That's 2 times that's like once every year and a half or so. And I do think he is the next best guy at 205. He won both of those fights. I believe a decision against Jan Blachowicz and a fight of the night 5th round finish over Glover Teixeira. But I mean, you look at Blachowicz and Teixeira, both of them have taken a loss, I believe, since fighting Gus. So are those wins worth as much now that both of those guys have lost to other opponents since losing to Gus? As much as I think he is a beast and will be the future of 205 once DC moves up, for him to not just be asking for these things but demanding them seems a little outrageous. Anthony Smith said it best, though, at his post-fight press conference. It seems to be that what we're waiting on, what pin needs to fall next, is Cormier needs to figure out what he was going to do next. It was wishful thinking to think that Hua might beat Smith, and then he gets an easy fight against Hua, and that's his last fight at 205. I think he wants to defend 205 because he wants to be the first active champion at both divisions. Fighters have held both belts at the same time. I believe Connor did it, but Connor quickly, dropped the featherweight belt and then was later stripped of the lightweight belt. I can't think of anyone who held both belts and was active in both divisions. Cormier winning the heavyweight belt, defending once at 205, then going back up to heavyweight would kind of be historic. I think that's what he's going after. A lot of people are speculating he's never going to fight at heavyweight again because there's no reason for him to, because it's a kind of a difficult cut for him. I predicted, before the Stipe fight that he'd beat Stipe, then fight Brock, then fight John, then call it quits. He might wedge a fight at 205 in there just because Brock's not going to be able to fight until January. He just entered the 6-month USADA pool. So we'll probably see like a Super Bowl card. I'm thinking 2019 we'll see a Super Bowl card, Brock versus DC, and then in the summer, the last fight of Cormier's career will be Cormier Jones 3 at heavyweight, which of course he'll win. But no, the question here is whether or not Cormier for the rest of 2018 is going to chill and sit on the commentary desk or take a fight at 205. Like I said, it could go either way, but I do think he is going to try and fight at 205. But I don't know who it'll be. I don't think it'll be Anthony Smith. I think he is probably going to be on the short list and be fighting for a number one contendership spot soon. But I don't think he's there already. Gustafsson now is pulled out at 227, as did Vulcan. Glover just lost. I guess you have Latifi there, sitting at 4, Blachowicz at 5, Jimmy Manuwa at 6. We'll see. But another thing that Anthony Smith said at the presser, which I do agree with, is that Cormier is a respectable dude. I think if he's not going to defend the belt at 205, I don't think he'll hold on to the belt long and clog up the division. I think we'll hear from him sooner rather than later. What do you think of all the madness at 205 before we put a bow on the UFC Hamburg recap?
Yeah, there's definitely, with the Hamburg card, the events of July, there's been a lot going on with the UFC's 205-pound division. Light heavyweight has seen more action as of late than, I can recall since some of the golden days of the Ultimate Fighter, some of the first seasons when, heck, they didn't even have a lightweight division. So things were a little more active in the lighter or in the heavier weight classes there. Man, I was really hoping that Lionheart Smith was going to get to fight Gustafsson in LA. That just seemed perfect. He took little damage in the fight against Shogun. Would have been ready over there to take on Gustafsson. And I think pretty much everyone in the MMA community is on the same page that Gustafsson is pretty off the mark here in making these demands. I don't think that anyone would dispute that he is probably number 3 in the weight class behind Cormier and John Jones. I guess now that Rumble Johnson is retired, Johnson cleaned his clock pretty good there. But to be as inactive as you are, that's like it's like the Diaz brothers. Everybody's laughing at Nick and Nate right now for them making the demands they are, because it's like, even if you have the draw you do, even if you are one of the best fighters at your weight class, if you never fight, if you haven't won in so long, it's hard for you to be a draw. And, well, some of those guys, they still have some of the power, but it's hard for you to have that leverage for negotiating things like that. I mean, that momentum is so critical, and yeah, I don't know. When I saw DC's post going off on Alexander Gustafsson, oh my goodness, that was just some fire. That was a good old school checking. He was putting Gustafsson in check, and I mean, truly, that's how it needs to happen. I mean, Gustafsson just needs to be able to fight with some kind of regularity and some kind of consistency before he can go around even beginning to try and make some demands like that. I mean, right now you got Daniel Cormier walking around who's got 2 title belts. He's calling a lot of shots in a lot of divisions right now. And if anyone has any room to make quote unquote demands, I would think that it would be Cormier. Yeah, be that as it may, once Gustafsson gets a couple wins going, gets back, and maybe if he's active again, maybe he can start calling some shots and making some demands that people listen. But right now, no, you just need to play the hand you're dealt, really.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I do think fighters more often need to stand up and voice their opinions more and not be the guy who's like, oh, shucks, I'll fight whoever the UFC puts in front of me. But at the same time, to be making demands to, I don't care who, the Diaz's are a great example. You haven't fought in years. Why do you think you dictate what happens next at this division for the title? I guess that's it for UFC Hamburg Recap. Look tomorrow for another TMP. We break down some fight announcements, a little MMA news. Aside from that, for P Money, follow him on Twitter at SweetPappyJones. Follow us at the MMA Podcast. Ramses, keep fighting. We love you, brother. Till then, we gone.